Greetings and welcome. My name is Jack and this is a beginner's guide for Pathfinder's 2nd edition Ranger, where we try to learn a new class by theory crafting a build from level 1 to level 20. As usual, we are going to start with a brief class overview, then I'm going to describe the character concept, and then we are going to dive into the build from level 1 to level 20. Then we are going to conclude with a damage projection. A little spoiler, this build is going to include some spellcasting, but since it's spellcasting that progresses not like a conventional spellcaster, but a bit differently, I'm going to actually address it throughout the build and not in a separate section at the end, in an attempt to not make this a 2 hours long video. If you would like to learn more about the Rangers, some guides online you can check out are A Decent Enough Guide to Rangers by Roki Poe and RPG Bot's Ranger Handbook. With that being said, let's get right into the video. The Ranger is a very peculiar class. It is a mixture between a fighter and a druid. So you can see it as a fighter with a bit of nature spellcasting, or a druid with less spellcasting but more martial proficiency. At least this is how it usually works in Dungeons and Dragons. This sometimes lands the Ranger in a weird spot, because playing the Ranger begs the question, well, if you like nature spellcasting, why don't you just play a druid? And if you like to deal damage, why don't you just play a fighter? And this is a very valid question in 5th edition, or at least it used to be. Rangers got some love as the edition progressed, and I think now they are not as terrible as they were at the beginning. Pathfinder 2nd edition addresses the Ranger conundrum by taking away the spellcasting from the class, with the exception of some focus spells, and just making it a full martial. What distinguishes them from the other martial classes is this nature theme they've got going for them. They've got some feats that give them, for example, animal companions and some class features which make them better in natural environments. And their defining characteristic is the hunt-prey action, which has some effects on tracking and survival checks, and also a specific, very impactful effect depending on their hunter's edge, which is their specialization. There are currently 3 flavors of edges. There is the flurry edge, which revolves around reducing the multiple attack penalties, so doing many strikes at a reduced penalty. There is the outwit edge, which revolves around being knowledgeable and succeeding in recall knowledge actions. And finally, there is the precision edge, which is all about doing one single powerful strike which deals extra damage, kind of like a 5th edition rogue. All these different flavors can be matched with ranged fighting and melee fighting with maybe 2 weapons or big large weapons. There are very different directions you can take the Ranger. It is not as versatile as the fighter. It's not the build your own character. There are still these 3 themes that give you a bit of direction when building the character, but it's certainly not pigeonholed into specific roles. You still have a lot of versatility when it comes to the Ranger. Other features are common with other martial classes, but 2 noticeable elements of their core class is how good they are in perception. They are very good at that. And also how many skills they get. They get more than other martials I have met so far. So in Pathfinder 2nd edition, it looks like the Ranger is a martial character with all the versatility and diversity that martial get in this system, with a particular nature flavor, which is really what the Ranger is all about. So with that being said, let's see what I plan to do with this class. Now, probably when building a Ranger, the most important decision is to decide which edge do you want to belong to. For a 5th edition player, the flurry edge is very appealing because multiple attacks penalties are very sad, and so being able to cheat the system somewhat by reducing this penalty is very appealing. This would probably lead us towards a dual wielding build, which is something we already featured on the channel, and in fact we keep using a dual wielding build as our golden standard for damage in our damage projections. So for this reason, and for the fact that I think it's a dual wielding flurry Ranger is a very common build to find online, I'm not going to do that. Instead, what I want to do is I want to do a sniper build, a ranged sniper build, which revolves around the precision edge, so a single attack which deals lots of damage. I also want to bring back the spellcasting aspect to the ranger, because I think it's a very fun part of the class identity in 5th edition, and Pathfinder 2nd edition allows me to do it through archetypes. So I'm going to do just that. And for a sniper build, there is a wonderful archetype that I can feature right now, which is the Eldritch Archer. What this does is it gives us eventually spellcasting proficiency, but it also gives us an incredibly potent action, which is Eldritch Shot. This allows us, for the cost of 3 action, to make an attack with a bow we are wielding, and then cast a spell which takes up to 2 actions, and deliver the spell through our Eldritch Shot. We can do this, of course, only with spells that inherently have an attack roll, so we are not going to throw fireballs with our bow, but still, this is the essence of a Gish build, a build which combines martial strikes and spell casting. And it matches very well, because Precision Edge only cares about us doing 1 strike, and this is the strike we are doing, so we are going to make the most out of our Hunter's Edge. To further reinforce the spellcasting aspect of the character, I'm going to try and cram in as many spellcasting archetype in the character as possible in order to gain access to more spell slots, and so have this character who can deliver this sniper shots and then do combat buffs and utility through their spellcasting, as well as delivering damage through Eldritch Shot. Now, Eldritch Shot looks like an incredibly powerful activity, but it has a glaring issue. It costs 3 action, so it roots us in the spot if we want to use this. We cannot do anything else with our turn except Eldritch Shot. This thematically matches very well our sniper team. After all, if we get bogged down in combat, we would expect as snipers to perform worse, but we would like mechanically to reduce this issue as much as possible. And this is where the Ranger class comes to our help, because they can provide an animal companion, and we can use this animal companion as a mount. And if we do that, eventually our animal companion is going to gain a free action, which they can use, and so we can move through our animal companion, effectively gaining 4 actions every turn. 1 we can use to move and stay out of combat, and the other we can use to deliver our Eldritch Shot consistently without being threatened by melee characters who rush at us. Mounts, of course, come with their own issues. The most problematic, I would say, is not necessarily their survivability, though that's something we need to keep in mind, especially because Ranger's progression for animal companions is slower than that of a class like the Druid, so our animal companion will become more vulnerable as the levels progress. But there is an even bigger issue, which is mounts, like horses, are big and unwieldy, and it's very hard to fit them in dungeons. If you've got stairs, good luck having a horse climbing the stairs of a tower to reach the princess or the dragon on top. So my idea was to circumvent this issue. Why don't I play a small race so that I can have a medium mount, which will more easily be able to fit into the cramped corridors you would expect in your usual dungeon. And then I got very excited because I thought, finally, I can play one of the most interesting ancestries I saw, which is the Sprite. Sprites are not just small, they are actually tiny. So we can, with them, ride a small mount, which would make it very easy for us to fit basically everywhere. And thematically, it's also very funny to think about this tiny diminutive warrior, which delivers these incredibly deadly, powerful single strikes. The problem with tiny ancestries, and sprites in particular, is that they have no reach, so they need to be in the same square of the creature they are fighting against if they want to target them in melee. And they are depressingly slow. They have only 20 feet speed. But if we use a mount, and if we use range attacks, both these issues are solved. So at that point, I was getting incredibly excited because I thought, oh dear, I can mount an owl animal companion or a bird and have this flying character right at level 1, which bombards enemy from a distance and is untouchable and is incredibly overpowered. But of course, the developers thought about that. And there are a lot of specific rules in place to prevent me from doing exactly this. In particular, mounts can only use their land speed unless they have the mount trait, and there are no creatures with the mount trait who also have a flying speed. This means that my dream of a sprite flying on an owl and sniping everyone on the ground is an impossible dream, at least for this character. But there are still ways that I can do similar things, if not necessarily as overpowered. So I'm going to try and do that with this build. I'm going to try to be as mobile as possible without having access to flight, and have this tiny, jack of all trades, sniper, arcane build. And if that doesn't sound like a lot of fun to you, then probably you are a Dwarven Paladin player. I'm joking, of course. I love you, Dwarven Paladin players. Never change. So with that being said, let's get right into the character build. Alright, as we said, we are going to start with the sprite, and for our background, since we are going to invest a little bit into medicine, field medic is as usual a decent option, but again, you can pick whatever you like. Our starting abilities pose a bit of a conundrum. Of course, we don't care about strength, we want to invest in dexterity as often as possible, and as we said, we care about wisdom, mostly for will saving throws. The Eldritch Archer, however, uses charisma for its spellcasting. So we could use a standard ability selection and get a charisma boost at level 1 instead of an intelligence one. And if we did that, then our archetypes would have to be charisma based. So a sorcerer and a bard. This would mean that we would be tied to the occult spellcasting, unless we want to be able to cast different schools, one for the bard, which is always occult, and any other school for the sorcerer, but then we would need to split our legendary skills to be able to take the more advanced spellcasting archetype feats. So instead I'm going for a more clean option and use intelligence as my primary casting stat. Now this means that our charisma boost is going to be bad, and therefore we are going to want to avoid taking with our Eldritch Archer spells that rely on charisma for their save throws. So we are going to focus mostly on buffs. Having chosen intelligence, we can then focus on intelligence-based spellcasters like the witch and the wizard, and take the arcane school, which I think for this kind of character is more fitting than the occult one, and use it for all the utility that the arcane school provides. The other ability boosts are dexterity, wisdom, and constitution. We have terrible strength, so no composite bows for us, and charisma is, at the end of the day, our dump stat. But on the plus side, our high intelligence combined with the incredible number of skills that the ranger gets means that we can get a bunch of skill training. So we will take athletics and acrobatics, because why not? We might as well take a bit of diplomacy. We have no charisma, but, you know, at least we can talk to some people without them wanting to kill us. We get warfare, law, warfare, medicine, and nature from a combination of background and class. Since we are intelligence, society seems like a reasonable investment. And of course, dexterity being our primary stat, we can do roguish things. And in particular, stealth has very good legendary and in general skill feats, and can be used to roll initiative, despite our perception being incredibly good. If we invest in legendary stealth, then our stealth for initiative is going to be even better, because our primary stat is dexterity and not wisdom. So at the end of the day, it's a very good idea to invest heavily into stealth with this character. For the heritage, you can pick your favorite. I'm going to choose an uncommon heritage. Your DM might object and not want you take a rare ancestry with an uncommon heritage. And if that is the case, you can choose any of the common sprite heritage that you like. But I do want to take Duskwalker. It's not very impactful power-wise on the build, but it has some late-game feats that I think support very well the sniper archetype we are going for. Right now, what it's doing is it's upgrading the low light vision to dark vision, and it has a reasonably decent feat at level 1, which is Ghost Hunter, which makes our weapon and unarmed attacks against incorporeal creatures become magical. But they are indeed already magical because we are sprites, so basically all our attacks gain the effects of the Ghost Touch property. I don't know how often this is going to come up in the campaign, but if we face incorporeal creature, then this is a very powerful boon we have access to. The other ancestry feats are not that impressive, with the notable exception of the Corgi mount, which would give us a familiar that we can ride. However, we are going to accomplish what we could get with the Corgi through our animal companion, So this would be a bit of a redundant feat, especially because the Corgi mount has been nerfed to avoid you going around with flying Corgis. You can see here that it can never benefit from familiar abilities that give it any other speeds other than a land speed, which is to keep it balanced at low level, but eventually at high level this makes the Corgi mount worse familiar than a regular one. So we're not going to do that. But if you can convince your DM at higher level to let you ride a Corgi instead of the animal companion, then this feat is amazing. It's probably not going to work because, as I said, at low level it's incredibly powerful, but it's worth a shot. So we're going to stick with Ghost Hunter, and for our level 1 class feat we can get the animal companion right off the bat. What animal companion are we going to get? Well, we cannot get a flying animal companion because it would not be able to fly unless it has the mount trait, and no flying animal companions have that. The second next best thing to a flying animal companion is an incredibly fast one. So the young Dromaeosaur, which is a Velociraptor basically, or a Deinonychus if you prefer, is small and has an incredible speed of 50 feet. That's almost twice as much as a regular character, and it is proficient in stealth. So it matches very nicely what we're trying to accomplish. At this level, if we want to, we can ride it, use 2 actions to strike with our bow, and the 3rd action to command our animal companion to move around, thus putting a lot of distance between us and the enemy with up to 100 feet. Another thing is to fight separate, send the raptor ahead, and use our 3rd action to command the 2 strikes from the raptor, or 1 strike and the stride to keep them safe, and deal a little bit more damage. Speaking of the weapon of choice, a very safe bet would be the short bow. This has decent range and it's very easy to use. However, since we are a sniper, I'm going to take with this build the long bow. This deals more damage when compared to the short bow. It has higher range, but it has the volley 30 feet trait, which means that unfortunately, if we are firing to an enemy within 30 feet, we take a -2 attack penalty. Hopefully, with the high movement of our mount and the ability to move twice, we can compensate for this unwieldy trait. But if you know your campaign is going to take place mostly in cramped spaces, and you think you're going to have lots of troubles with this trait, then just take a short bow and avoid yourself this huge headache. For our Hunter's Hedge, as we said, we're going to go for the precision one. This allows us to deal an additional 1d8 precision damage for the first time we hit a target in a round. So us striking twice, right now at low level, means that maybe we miss with our first strike, but we hit with our second, so we have a higher chance of applying our precision damage. Eventually, this damage scales up. In order to trigger our precision edge, we need to have hunted the prey. It is important to note that this action can be undertaken once we see or hear the prey. So we might be able to undertake this action before combat starts, and this is something that we might want to try and do as much as possible, especially once we unlock our Eldritch Shot, so that we don't have a turn where we use this action, and so we no longer have the 3 actions required for the Eldritch Shot. Hunt Prey inherently gives us some bonuses to perception checks and survival checks to track our prey, and interestingly, it also allows us to ignore the penalty for attacking at range our target within the 2nd range increment of our prey. This is another reason to take the longbow. We are really going to snipe with it because it means we're going to be able to fire at the target up to 200 feet without penalty. Of course, in your regular dungeon, this is a very rare occurrence, but if we are out in the open, then we are virtually untouchable with us being able to move 100 feet and strike from 200 feet. So we are already at level 1, a pretty scary sniper to face. That is all for level 1. Let us move on to level 2. For our first class feat, I'm going to take Gravity Weapon. This is a focus spell, which gives us a status bonus to damage equal to twice the number of weapon damage die. Right now it's +2, but this is going to scale up as we get better striking runes. This again compounds our objective of being the single target damage dealer with 1 big hit. This is also a focus spell which we can precast. It lasts for a minute, so if we know combat is coming, we might be able to be efficient action-wise and do both Hunt Prey and Gravity Weapon before combat breaks out. If we don't, we can use these 2 actions together in the same turn and then deliver just a regular strike. we get our first free archetype, and as I said, we are looking to cram as many spellcasting archetypes in this build as we can. We also cannot take the Eldritch Archer archetype before level 6, so we might as well do something useful with our archetypes until then. I'm going to prioritize the Witch dedication over the Wizard one, because I think it provides us some very nice bonuses at this level. Although the Witch is a bit confusing, it has some weird features that it's not very clear how they work. So what the dedication says is you gain a familiar, and this familiar has 2 common cantrips, because witches use familiars as wizards use spellbooks. You can only prepare one of these 2 cantrips, so from this point of view, the Witch dedication is worse than the Wizard's, who allows you to cast 2 cantrips. Here we get only 1. This is of course compensated by the fact that we gain a familiar. This familiar, however, has 1 less familiar ability than normal, and this is the first confusing bit about the Witch dedication. Does this mean that the familiar only has 1 familiar ability? If we look at Path Builder, we see that our familiar has 2 selectable abilities. And this is also a fair interpretation, because the Witch familiars actually have 3 abilities at level 1. So what is normal for witches is for the familiar to have 3 abilities. Now this depends entirely onto your DM interpretation. It's not the end of the world if we get just 1 familiar ability. I'm going to stick with what Path Builder is recommending here, but be aware that can be this interpretation for the familiar. Another confusing thing is that the Witch dedication says that you have to select a patron. This means that you can choose what kind of school you're going to cast your spells from, but you don't get any other effects that the patron would usually grant. An interesting thing about Witch's familiar is that they are better than any other familiar, in particular because if they die, you get them back the next day, whereas regular familiar you have to wait a week. This is very reasonable for the Witch, because the familiar, as I said, is their spellbook, and being left without for a week would make them useless for a week, which is very bad. I'm not sure if this rule applies to us as well or not. In the Witch's familiar description, it says that if your familiar dies, your patron replaces it during your next daily preparations. This is under the familiar description and not under the patron description. So you could argue that this benefit applies for characters who take the Witch as an archetype. You could argue that since it involves the patron and the Witch archetype says that you don't get any other effects that the patron grants, then you do not get your familiar back after 1 day, so you have to be very careful for it not to die. Beyond the literal interpretation of the rule, there is an argument in favor of having your familiar come back after 1 day just like the Witch, because just like the Witch, you've got a bunch of spells bound to your familiar, and if you lose the familiar, you lose the spells for a week. There is also an argument against, which is that the familiar is very, very powerful with this ability. And so getting an overcharged familiar and a cantrip from a dedication makes it way better than another dedication like the Familiar Master, which would give you just a familiar with 2 abilities and no cantrips and no resurrection after a day. If the familiar doesn't come back after a day if it dies, then what our familiar is going to be is that it's going to be a dormouse which sits into our bag for the entirety of the day, never gets out of it, never gets in danger, and has some familiar abilities like abilities to give us extra cantrips, like Cantrip Connection, and maybe the ability to get extra focus spells, extra ancestry spells, which we are going to eventually get, and stuff like that. If we have the ability to make our familiar come back when they die after 1 day, then there is an argument in favor of making our familiar an incredible scout. I would in fact argue that if that is the case, this character is a contender for the best scout in the game, and might even be better than our druid build. Because what you can do is you can give your familiar a bunch of movement abilities like Flyer or Burrower, and then give them eventually, once we unlock more abilities for the familiar, manual dexterity and even speech. And all of a sudden you've got a miniature creature that is very unassuming and easy to miss, that you can cast invisibility on, that can fly and burrow underground, or maybe even on ceilings, depending on the material they're made of, to avoid danger and avoid being detected. So they're just as versatile as a wild-shaped druid, but they have a huge advantage over the wild-shaped druid. And I would say they have the most important asset that a scout could possibly want for. And that asset is that you don't care if it dies. Being scouts is extremely dangerous because you can get separated from the party, you can get caught in deadly traps, and your DM is eventually going to screw you over if you keep going on solo missions. If it is the Dormouse, you don't care if it dies horribly. It has saved you from a terrible ambush or a deadly trap, and you don't lose any of the spells you've prepared that day, and the next day you get it back and you can do it all over again. So this character, depending on how the DM interprets the familiar rule for the witch, is, among the other things, potentially an incredibly effective scout. Okay, I've talked a lot about the familiar. Now let's move on and get our first skill feat. Here, as usual, I take Assurance. You could take Assurance in Medicine, but I think that for us, Stealth is more important. We use it for a number of things. We might want to scout ourselves. We are, after all, tiny, so it's very easy for us to find cover and places to hide. And Assurance ensures that we never critically fail when it's important. We get to choose a patron for the witch, and there is one patron here which grants us access to arcane spells. So we're going to choose that, the Rune patron. And this gives us proficiency in Arcana, which is relevant for us because we are going to use this, we're going to bring this proficiency up to Legendary in order to unlock higher level archetype spellcasting feats. This is all for level 2. Let's move on to level 3. We get our first skill increase. At this low level, we might be using our mount offensively, so we might need to heal it, and Medicine is important for that. So let's increase our proficiency in Medicine so that we can use Battle Medicine better. We get our first general feat, and unfortunately, both the Sprite and the Duskwalker heritage don't really have all that many good ancestry feats. So I think it's necessary for us right now to take Adopted Ancestry and choose an ancestry which actually has better feats. And what better ancestry than Human? Right now this is not doing much, so as always this is a feat you can retrain into if you want something that has an effect at this level. If you're playing at level 3 and planning to spend a lot of time at level 3, you can take Toughness, you can take Improved Initiative, but eventually we want to have Adopted Ancestry for when we hit level 5. We also get Iron Will for better proficiency in will saving throws. At level 4, we are going to take 2 archetype feats, so that when we reach level 6, we have taken the minimum requirement of feats to be able to take a different archetype from the Witch archetype. And that archetype will be, of course, the Eldritch Archer. So right now, we can take only 2 dedication feats for the Witch. One is basic Witch spellcasting, which gives us access to spells. Right now, we only have a level 1 spell slot. I also forgot to mention what cantrip I'm going to prepare as the Witch. You can teach 2 cantrips to your familiar. One of them is got to be Gouging Claw. We cannot take offensive cantrips with our Eldritch Archer dedication because these deal some damage plus our spellcasting ability modifier, which is Charisma for the Eldritch Archer, so that would be 0. Instead, we take it with the Witch so that we can add our intelligence modifier, which is greater than 0. We are not going to use this cantrip right now, but it's going to be essential later on. So you can take here another cantrip that you think might come in handy. For example, Shield, and prepare Shield instead, or any other cantrip really you want. I'm going to keep Gouging Claw prepared here to remind us that this is what we want to have eventually, but at low level we are going to instead prepare the other cantrip here. We also have a level 1 spell to choose. Every time we gain a new spell slot, we can choose to learn through our familiar 2 different spells. We might want to put Shocking Grasp in here, because this is a good spell to cast with the Eldritch Shot. And another excellent spell for a Marshal is True Strike. This gives us advantage in a system which does not have advantage. True Strike also has additional benefits like ignoring circumstance penalties to the attack roll because of the target being concealed or hidden, so it's just amazing for us. And our first level spell slots eventually are going to just be dedicated to True Strike. But when you hit level 6, you can choose to prepare Shocking Grasp here if you want your Magic Strike once a day to have a bit more hitting power. The second feat we can take is Basic Witchcraft. This gives us a Witch feat, and I spent like 20 minutes talking about how good familiars are for us. So as you can imagine, getting extra familiar abilities is very good. This adds to the confusion of how familiars work, because if your DM ruled that you get only 2 abilities, this feat literally states that you can select 4 instead of 2. So do you get 4 familiar? Do you get 3 extra familiar abilities? Do you get only 2? You cannot take this feat because you do not have 2 familiar abilities. Who knows? I'm going to assume, regardless of the starting number of familiar abilities, that you can take this feat, and then you either have 3 familiar abilities or 4. For the skill feats, the reason why we upgraded medicine is that, among other things, we can now take continual recovery to use our treat wounds action more often. This is especially beneficial because this is the only way right now we can heal our Velociraptor, our clever curve. We get to level 5 and we get our first ability boost, and we are going to stick with buffing all our important abilities: Constitution, Wisdom, Dexterity, and Intelligence. This is great because since our intelligence modifier is increasing, we also get more skill proficiencies. On the other hand, we are really running short on good skills to take. We are intelligent, so we might as well take a bit of crafting, but really pick your favorite at this point. We've got everything we could possibly want. We also get a skill increase, and stealth is very important for us. We can use it to roll for initiative, we can use it to hide. If we are sniping, that's something we might want to do, so very good skill. And we get ancestry feats, and thank God we chose human, because this allows us to take one of the best level 1 feats in the game, natural ambition. And so we get another class feat. Here I think you can choose whether to take heal companion if you feel like your animal companion has the risk of dying very often and you want to be able to avoid their death. Since I am planning to keep my Velociraptor outside of combat, and in fact just use it as a mount, hopefully they are not going to be in the thick of it and take a lot of damage. We're going to retreat, run away a lot of the time. So I don't think this is essential, although it is appealing. So if you want to take this instead, be my guest. However, I'm going to take Hunted Shot. This is basically flurry of blows with a bow. You can attack a target twice with your bow, and you can also combine the damage of the 2 strikes to overcome damage resistance. Now, why did I take Hunted Shot when in a level I'm going to get an attack, which is Eldritch Shot, which is going to basically take all my actions? The reason is that this way, in the turns where for whatever reason I'm not able to use the Eldritch Shot, maybe I have to command my animal companion to make it move twice, maybe the combat started and I didn't have my Hunt Prey active, maybe I want to cast a spell for whatever reason, or I need to do another action, then I have this very efficient and very reliable way of still dealing damage with 2 strikes, which is like the golden standard of damage dealing actions. And as we saw with the monk, action efficiency is king in this game. So this feat is amazing. It is so good that if you want it, you can take it at level 1. I just like the animal companion better. Or you can take it at level 2 instead of gravity weapon. I just don't feel we are that action starved at level 2 that we really need this, but this is an amazing backup option. Just having this is going to make us not feel that bad when we cannot Eldritch Shot. And this is such an impressive feat that I think it is an argument for taking the Ranger as an archetype for basically any character who wants to be a ranged damage dealer. Okay, we get a bonus to move through natural terrains, which is very thematic for the Ranger, but it's something we are probably never going to use because we are never going to move through anything. Our mount is going to do all the moving for us. And we get weapon expertise as all martial classes. And finally, we reach level 6. Level 6 is an amazing level for this build, and I would say it's the level where this build really blooms. First of all, for our class feats, we get the mature animal companion. Unfortunately, we get it 2 levels later than a druid would, but it's still good enough. Our companion is now medium, it grew up, and it gets an action to stride or strike every turn for free. Now, technically, this action allows the companion to stride towards the enemy and not away from the enemy. So the GM might be very literal and prevent you from just running away using your animal companion. If that is the case, then you're going to have to alternate turns where you do Eldritch Shots with turns where you use your action to command your animal companion to move 100 feet away from the enemy, and then do Hunted Shot and other actions. However, it seems to me that this feat was intended for rangers that go in melee, and it seems reasonable that the stride action could be used also to get away from the enemy and not just move towards them. But again, talk to your DM. It's not the end of the world if they prevent you from moving away from the enemy. And then finally, the time has come. We can get the Eldritch Archer dedication and the amazing Eldritch Shot activity, which allows us to combine the effects of a spell and a martial strike. This means that despite our spell proficiency being kind of crappy, we can use our ranged attack roll, which is instead excellent, to strike with the spell as well. We have to select a spell list. We could go with the arcane spell list and just be a fully arcane character. However, I'm going to choose for the Eldritch Archer dedication the primal spell list. Again, we are not going to use necessarily damage or saving throw effects, and I think that the primal list has some very important and interesting buffs for our character that we want to have access to. So let's take a look at our spells. First of all, the Witch archetype has given us an extra spell slot at level 2, so we can choose 2 spells to learn and prepare 1 each day. Here, the arcane list provides us with a very powerful combat buff, which is Spider Climb. This lasts for 10 minutes, and it allows us to target 1 creature, including our mount, and this allows our mount to gain a climb speed. Now, non-mount animal companions, when mounted, can only use land speed, and the climb speed is clearly a land speed. It's not swimming, it's not flying, it's moving on the land, although it's doing so vertically. Your raptor is also going to have their little claws free, so they can hang from the ceilings, and while this is not as good as flying, this is the second next best thing, and we have it right at level 2. So if we are fighting indoor, we can climb on wall and ceilings and stay out of reach of the enemies, hopefully. And if we are outdoors, then we can stay 200 feet away from the enemy and shoot them from afar. So we are a very mobile character despite us being snipers. For our skill feat, we are going to take more of the medicine skill feat. Since we're using it, we might as well be good at it. And we're going to take Ward Medic. I forgot to mention that at level 6, the Eldritch Archer also gives us a cantrip. Here we can take a utility cantrip from the primal list. For example, Guidance, to give people status bonuses to attack rolls. If there are other characters who have Guidance and you don't need this, you can take something like Protect Companion, which is kind of like a shield spell for your animal companion and can increase their survivability. Or maybe Light if there are characters in the party that cannot see in the dark as well as we do. At level 7, we can get our Master increased in Medicine since we're using it so much. I'm also going to take Incredible Initiative with our general feats. We then also gain better proficiency with Reflex Saving Throw and the ability to critically succeed when we succeed. We get better proficiency in Perception, and right now it's better than our Stealth modifier, so we can just roll regular initiative, but eventually our stealth proficiency is going to be better, so we're going to try and use that as much as possible for initiative. And we get weapon specialization like all marshals. At level 8, we can get a bunch more spells, thanks to the basic Eldritch Archer spellcasting. We are gaining an extra spell slot, thanks to the Witch. We can prepare a heightened Shocking Grasp. I'm going to assume you always use these high-level spells for damage, but in order to save time in a video that's probably going to be too long, I'm going to show you the spell that I eventually will take at level 3, once I have all my spell slots available. And this spell is going to be Heightened Blood Vendetta. This is because, as a ranged characters, we do not have access to reactions, so this gives us a bunch of reactions we can do to deal a little bit of persistent bleed damage, just so that we have something to do with our reaction. For the Eldritch Archer spells, the basic dedication gives us all 3 levels of spellcasting. Unfortunately, Primal doesn't have True Strike, so I'm going to take a worse spell, and I'm going to take Pet Cache. This is useful in emergency situations. You can touch your mount and hide it in an extra dimensional space. You can use it to smuggle your Velociraptors to cross areas where it's complicated maybe to have it follow you, and it's generally useful to have. For level 2, Spider Climb again is essential. We can have 2 copies of Spider Climb if we find it's very useful. If we don't use it very much, level 2 has amazing options in the arcane list, such as Invisibility. This lasts for 10 minutes. Again, it's a buff that can last through multiple combats, and we can use it to protect our animal companion So it seems like we are actually flying. Finally, at level 3, the Eldritch Archer has an amazing spell in the primal spell list, which is a control spell in the form of Wall of Water. This doesn't care that our charisma modifier is crap, because it just works as well as it would for a high-level druid. And what it does is it creates a wall which can be crossed, but it's going to cost 2 actions, one to walk up to the wall, and one to swim through it. And the great thing is that we can use piercing projectiles to pass through the wall. If we do that, we have the range increments halved, but remember that we can fire 200 feet with our bow without any penalties. So we are better at firing through the wall of water than the enemies are, even if they have long bows as well. And if they have other projectiles like slingshots or bludgeoning or slashing projectiles, then these just can't pass through the wall. So we can put ourselves in a safe spot and protect ourselves with Wall of Water and shoot enemies through it. It's an incredibly powerful asset at such a low level. We also get another archetype feat, and I'm going to take another Eldritch Archer feat. This is Enchanting Arrow, and the rationale behind taking Enchanting Arrow is that this is a 2-action strike, which we can do as an alternative to Eldritch Shot and Hunted Shot. So maybe we want to cast True Strike and this, and it's an arrow that deals a little bit extra mental damage, and also has the chance of stunning the enemy without saving throw. So this combines very well with True Strikes, which increases our chance to critically hit. So we are very flexible in our routine. We're not forced to use Eldritch Shot every turn. If we want to use 2 actions for our attack, we can do so. If we want to use 1 action for our attack, we can do so as well. Of course, I didn't mention it, but most of the times we're going to Eldritch Shot using our Gouging Claw. The fact that we have to use a melee spell attack is not a problem, because Eldritch Shot says just that you have to make an attack roll. It doesn't have to necessarily be ranged. We also get level 8 skill feat, and we have high proficiency in stealth, so we might as well take Quiet Allies to improve our overall party ability to be stealthy. At level 9, we get a skill increase, and at this point we're going to have to start increasing Arcana, because level 12 is approaching rapidly, and we want to have Master Proficiency at level 12, so we can take the Spellcasting Archetype feat. So we need Expert Proficiency in Arcana right now. For our Ancestry feat, again, Human is paying off, and is allowing us to take Multi-Talented for another spellcasting dedication, and this is the Wizard dedication. Our Arcane School is just flavorful. You can go for whatever you like. Illusion seems appropriate for a Fae. I'm just going to take Universalist because I'm a Universalist kind of guy. We get Nature's Edge, which flat-foots the enemy if they are in natural difficult terrain or in a terrain from a snare. This is circumstantial, although it is thematic for a ranger. We also get better class DC, and thanks to the Wizard we get an extra skill training. We are already trained in Arcana, in fact we are expert at it, so we can choose whatever skill we want. We might as well pick Occultism since we've got the intelligence to make it work. And here is our Archetype Wizard. We have 2 cantrips which we can prepare. We can add 4 to our spellbook and prepare 2 every day. I think like we've got the important stuff covered. I think Mage Hand and Message are both useful cantrips out of combat to have access to, but really pick your favorite here. With this character right now we have to juggle both a familiar and a spellbook. We can find spells from scrolls, or we can buy them and we can add it to either of these 2 objects. Keep in mind though that every time we level up we automatically get to learn 2 spells for the spell slot we have just unlocked. So while adding low-level spells can be cheap and can provide us a bit of the utility that the Witch and the Wizard have, we are, at the end of the day, still a martial, so most of our resources, money-wise, are going to go into our weapon, into barding, perhaps, for our animal companion. So we really do not have that much money to spare to learn spells. So keep this in mind and don't stretch yourself too thin trying to imitate what wizards and witches do. You can partially do that, but don't neglect your important expenses. We get to level 10, we get ability boosts, and we boost the same ability as before. We also get an extra skill proficiency thanks to our intelligence boost, and we might round out our knowledge skills and get religions. We are a very knowledgeable ranger. All our studies are definitely paying off. And for our class feats, I'm going to take the basic wizard spellcasting. This is going to give us 3 extra spell slots. Otherwise, at level 10, we would not have gained any other spell slots. 3 extra spell slots seems fun, but what about even more spell slots? I'm going to take Arcane Breath. You could take Patron's Breath. They are essentially the same. I just like celebrating being a wizard by taking more wizard feats. And this will give us extra spell slots of the lowest level we can cast. So the 2 highest spell slots we have unlocked. We will have 1 spell slot, but all the others below, we will gain 2. Right now, this feat is only giving us 1 extra spell slot, but eventually it's going to give us plenty. So this is a very important investment to make right now. For our wizard spells, at this point, a bunch of True Strikes for level 1s seem like a very reasonable investment. At level 2, we can take more invisibilities, or if we want more defensive options when things matter, we can take Blur. So we can have our mount be invisible and we can be blurred ourselves to increase our survivability. And level 3, again, heightened Blood Vendetta for the damage. Although right now, I would argue that probably Shocking Grasp is more appealing than heightened Blood Vendetta, as I said before. We get a skill feat and we might as well take Assurance in Medicine. Again, when we need to heal our animal companion, we are sure that we do not mess up. Level 11, we must increase Arcana up to Master, as we will see, for the next level. For our general feats, although we are not in melee much, still extra hit points are always nice, and there aren't really that many general feats that do amazing things, so as always, I take Toughness here. We get better proficiency in Fortitude saving throws, and the ability to critically succeed when we succeed. Very good. Better armor expertise. And we get the ability to move through obstacles, difficult terrain, while ignoring the effect of non-magical difficult terrain. Again, not something we are going to use much, because it's our animal companion that does the moving for us. And we get to level 12. This is another explosive level for this build, because here we can get another bunch of spell slots, thanks to the expert spellcasting feats. We can take those because we've got expert proficiency in Arcana for the wizard, and for the witch, we've got expert proficiency in the skill associated with our patron, which is again Arcana. So double expert spellcasting. For the wizard, this means 2 extra spell slots, 1 at level 4 and 1 at level 2, because we unlocked a higher level spell slot, so Arcane Breath is giving us an extra spell slot. For the witch, only 1, because we don't have Patron's Breath yet. What good spells do we have access to at level 4? You know what happens? When we heighten invisibility at 4th level, it becomes greater invisibility, and we can attack while being invisible. So our familiar can be regular invisible and move around without attacking, and we can be greatly invisible, so we can attack while being invisible. We are an extremely mobile, ranged sniper, and the enemy doesn't know where we are. Truly a nightmare to face. This tactic is so powerful that I am going to take this spell for all our 4th level spell slots and never look back. We also get a skill feat, and since we got Assurance in Medicine, we can take Risky Surgery and use it pretty safely, ironically. At level 13, we can increase our Stealth to Master. This means that all of a sudden, Stealth is better than Perception for Initiative. So let's roll that instead if we can. Let's try to avoid notice during exploration as much as possible, so we have a +1 bonus to Initiative. We get an Ancestry feat, and here the sprite does have a very good Ancestry feat, and that feat is Invisible Trickster. Another cast of invisibility, once per hour, as a 4th level spell. This is absolutely incredible, and if you think this is good, just wait until you see the Innate Surge familiar ability, which allows us once per day to cast an innate spell granted from an Ancestry feat. So we can cast this once per hour and an extra time while ignoring this restriction once per day. What more could you possibly ask for? While our magical abilities are through the roof, our martial abilities are keeping up because we get weapon mastery to increase our weapon proficiency. At level 14, we can finally get Patron's Breath for even more spell slots. We can double down on the Witch's spell we've got thus far. So more True Strikes at first level, more Invisibility at second, more Blood Vendetta at third. And we get our first 5th level spells. Wall of Water is nice to create a barrier between ourselves and the enemy. If that barrier is something that cannot be crossed, it's even better. So we can take Wall of Stone here and be even harder to get. If there is nowhere for our Velociraptor to climb onto, well, we could just materialize cover out of thin air. Again, this effect is so powerful that I think we need as many copies of it as we can get. And with our extra spells for the wizard, I'm just going to replicate what I did with the witch. But bear in mind that these are prepared slots, so you can put things that are more useful for your campaign or the particular mission if you need to. Speaking of getting more spell slots, why not get Expert Eldritch Archer spellcasting and gain 2 more spell slots? These are primal spells. It's level 14. You know what an amazing primal spell is? Airwalk. This lasts for 5 minutes and it allows the target to walk on air as if it were solid ground. So our clever girl has figured out how to fly while using its land speed. It is actually better than flight because you don't need an action to avoid falling down while you're flying. So this is just incredible. If you've got a druid in your party, have them cast this on you at lower level. This spell on its own is the reason why I think going primal for the Eldritch Archer dedication is better than going arcane. Speaking of incredibly good spells, if you heighten Spider Climb to 5th level, then this lasts for an hour. There we go, we just freed a bunch of level 2 spell slots. Previously, maybe you wanted to use some of these level 2 spell slots, not for invisibility or blur, but for Spider Climb, because it was your primary way to move out of trouble. But now, Spider Climb lasts for so long that you can use these lower level spells for other things. I'm still going to keep one at level 2 in case this runs out for emergency sake, but you can, if you want to, exchange this for something else as well. At level 14, we get another skill feat, and we are going to take Swift Sneak. We don't move our speed while sneaking, it's our mount that does that, but this is a prerequisite for the legendary stealth feat, which we really want, so we have to take this right now. It's level 15, and we get our first legendary skill increase, and we're going to get stealth first, because the legendary feat is great, because we use it for our initiative. It's just a very good idea to do it now. More skill increases, more ability boosts in the same places as before. Nothing increases, everything is even, so it's a bit sad. But level 20 is going to feel very happy. For our general feat, it is Canny Acumen time again. This does nothing right now. You can take Die Hard, you can take whatever else. You want this at level 17 when this becomes active, and you want this to boost our will saving throws. We get greater weapon specialization, good. We get better proficiency on reflex saving throws, legendary actually, and when we crit fail, we fail. And when we fail, we take half damage, so great. We also get legendary proficiency in perception. Unfortunately, we are so good in stealth that stealth is still better than perception, but this is actually going to pay off at level 19. It's level 16, and this is a ranger build, but we haven't really taken many ranger feats. So I think at this point we can take one, and I'm going to take double prey. This allows us to use the hunt prey action and pick 2 targets instead of just 1. A bit of action efficiency, you know how much I love it. We can also get an archetype class feat, and I'm going to take phase arrow here. This allows us to make a single strike, and it's something we can do once per day. And this phase arrow ignores all cover, it ignores the conceal condition, it just tracks the creature, whatever it is, even if it's hidden from us, as long as it's not undetected, we can find where they are by shooting this unerring arrow. It's circumstantial, it also has a +4 status bonus to hit creatures when they wear any type of armor, and it cannot be blocked by the shield block, unless the shield is magical itself. So it's a nice bit of utility to have access to in the circumstances where it would be useful. We also get a skill feat, and we can get our first legendary skill feat, which is legendary sneak. We are very, very good at hiding, as you would expect from a tiny fey creature. Since it's level 16, we are also getting more spell slots. The spell slots we already have, we're going to double down on what we took before. However, I would say that we have access to at least 4 invisibilities per day, even more thanks to our innate spells. So maybe with the wizard actually, we can take a bit of utility instead. We can take something like freedom of movement. Mobility is very important. Our mount's mobility is very important. And with this, we can make it immune to being immobilized, grabbed, restrained, automatically succeed her escape attempts. So this seems like a very good safety policy and contingency to have in place. Speaking of contingencies, if, God forbid, our mount should get knocked out, or we should be in danger despite all our best efforts, Dimension Door is a way to get out of dodge. We can combine this with Pet Cache, which is just one action, because we cannot Dimension Door with another creature, but we can Pet Cache, hide our mount, and then Dimension Door and get 120 feet away from that danger. This is still within range of our strikes, so after we do that, we can then resummon our mount, run further away from danger while keeping shooting. So this is a very important failsafe, and it's very nice that we have it available. With level 6, we are kind of approaching our highest tier spell slots, so I'm going to actually show you what I was saying about using these spell slots for damage purpose. We can have some Nova damage in combination with Eldritch Shot by casting together with its Shocking Grasp. Right now, this adds 7d12 damage and 1d4 plus 5 persistent damage. It is not clear if the +1 circumstance bonus applies to our ranged striker as well. If it does, great. If it doesn't, it's still a lot of damage. There is a 6th level spell which can theoretically deal more damage than Shocking Grasp if we are facing enemies that have low Constitution saving throws. And that spell is Disintegrate. This deals 12 d10 damage, but unlike Shocking Grasp, this can be halved by successful Fortitude saving throws. If you crit with this, the result of the attack is going to be treated 1 degree worse. So it's a very scary spell, and one that it's certainly very fun to experiment with. Like shooting a disintegrating arrow? Yes, please sign me up. Although if you want to play your safest option, just take Shocking Grasp. Then again, you might be facing electricity resistant enemies. If that is the case, Disintegrate comes in handy. We also get a 6th level spell slot for the Eldritch Archer. I'm going to maintain the trend of using buff spells. And I'm going to take Stone Skin, which gives 10 resistance to physical damage. This is nice to increase the survivability of our mount. And it has a reasonably long duration. It's level 17 and we get our 2nd legendary skill increase, and we have to take Arcana because level 18 is going to be another one of those explosive levels for us. We get an Ancestry feat, and this is the reason why I chose Duskwalker. We get Orithros Decree. This is an action we can use to buff one of our arrows, and then this arrow deals an extra 60 damage resisted on a basic Fortitude save. The save will be based on our class DC, which is 35, and it's 1 point higher than our spell DC, which is 34. Is this the best Ancestry feat in the game? No. Is this even good? I don't know about that. But, you know, we can combine this with Phase Arrow and True Strike to maybe deliver some pretty potent criticals. So you have this enemy which is running away or hiding, and we can pinpoint them and deal incredible damage. It's a very thematic feat to have, and one that complements very well our sniper theme, so I chose to take it. But again, if your DM doesn't want you to take this particular heritage, as you see, it's not the end of the world if you take another Ancestry feat here. We also get higher proficiency rank to our Ranger class, conveniently, because we just needed it for this Ancestry feat. And now we can ignore the penalty when attacking within the 3rd range increment of our weapon. So that's 300 feet of range we have. Again, in your typical dungeon, this just doesn't matter, but if a situation arises where you can leverage this insane amount of range, then combined with our great mobility and our ability to be invisible while doing that, we are just an absolute terror to deal with. And keep in mind that we are also extremely competent infiltrators, so we can do this from maybe behind enemy lines. It's level 18, and our master spellcasting feats have become available. So we are going to take both of them, thanks to our legendary proficiency in Arcana. This is going to give us extra spell slots. So more Wall of Stones. Yes, thank you. More Shocking Grasps. And we can also get the legendary feat for Arcana, which is Unified Theory. Now we can use our Great Arcana modifier whenever we use Nature, Occultism, or Religion check. So we basically know everything. At level 19, we get our final skill increase. We might as well bump Medicine up to Legendary. We get a general feat, and this is a very unique feat we can get. It's a very difficult one to get because it requires Legendary in Perception. This is the first character which achieves such high levels of perception. And this is a feat, a general feat, which has a level 19 requirement. So this is a very hard feat to get. And what it does is that we are constantly under the effect of true seeing. And we can use our perception modifier, which is amazing, to counteract illusionary effects. I am speechless at how good this feat is, especially for a general feat. Usually general feats aren't this impactful, but sure, let's take it. We also get better armor proficiency and the ability to rest in the armor without being fatigued. Now, it's level 19. We survived 19 levels without having this skill. It's a bit late for that. If this is the bane of your existence, there is a second level spell. You can get it with any of your archetypes, and it's called Instant Armor, and it allows you to snap your fingers with an action and instantly wear your armor. So if you keep getting ambushed without your armor, this is a spell you can certainly learn and use without having to wait to level 19. You're welcome. We also get, this is also something that we would have really liked to get earlier, but better now than never. And what we get is Swift Prey, which is the ability to use Hunt Prey as a free action if it's the first action of our turn. Why wouldn't it be? I don't know, but basically Hunt Prey is a free action now. Better action economy, great. And finally, at long last, we get to level 20. We get our final ability boosts, bringing all our important stats up to 20, except for dexterity, which is 22. We get our final intelligence increase. We neglected the charisma skills. As always, I take performance at level 20. There aren't many ranger capstone we can take, so I think I'm just going to stick with the trend of just taking archetype feats. And I'm going to take 2 Eldritch Archer archetype feats. The first is the Master Spellcasting, more spell slots. We'll check the spell slot situation later. And then I will get Impossible Volley. This allows me to make strikes against all enemies within a 10-foot radius burst within our range. It's a bit of AoE damage utility. I don't know how often we are going to use this, but it's better than nothing. And we also get our final legendary skill in Legendary Medic. Our final spell list consists in a bunch of Shocking Grasps, Disintegrates, and for our level 8 spell, there is a spell which actually outdamages Shocking Grasp by a bit. It also deals a different damage type, and that spell is Polar Ray. This deals 10d8 cold damage, but it also drains 2, which deals direct HP damage. On a critical hit, also the damage is doubled as all these damage spells. So just for variety's sake, I'm going to prepare 2 of these spells. And for our final Eldritch Archer spells, at level 7 we have a very powerful healing effect, which is Regenerate. This makes it so the target creature can restore 15 hit points at the start of every turn, and the target creature, while under the effect of this regeneration, cannot die from damage. So a nice bit of survivability for ourselves and our mount as well. And finally, at level 8 we can take an extra Polar Ray because our spell attack is terrible, but we're not going to use this. We're going to use our regular attack roll instead. And with this, we have wrapped up our build. We have a very powerful single target damage activity in the form of Eldritch Shot combined with Gouging Claw. This is repeatable. We can do it as many times we want in an encounter. There is no cap on the amount of times we can do it. We can supercharge this damage by casting an actual spell instead of a cantrip and adding Shocking Grasp or Polar Ray or even a cheeky Disintegrate sometimes. We've got a bunch of control effects, wall spells, we've got some teleport contingencies and some pretty neat buffs, including True Strike. If our expected routine of casting Eldritch Shot and moving around with our pet, or just casting Eldritch Shot while being perched somewhere or flying in the air doesn't work. We have a lot of fallback options thanks to Hunter's Shot and Enchanting Arrow. And just look at our abilities. We are proficient in every single skill except for 2. So there is very little this character cannot accomplish. Before wrapping up the character build, we have the final essential aspect for a martial character to consider, which is the damage per round. How good is a sniper build such as this compared with other damage-dealing melee builds? We have 3 disadvantages with this particular build. Our standard routine relies on a single attack instead of multiple. We saw in the monk videos that usually multiple attacks tend to perform better. Our second disadvantage is that we are a dexterity build and not a strength build, so we deal inherently less damage. And we are also a ranged build and not a melee build. So we are actually using a two-handed weapon, which is a longbow, but instead of dealing d12 damage or d10, we are dealing just d8 weapon damage. So are the benefits that we get from our Eldritch Shot plus cantrip combination enough to overcome these disadvantages? How far do we lag behind compared with other martial characters? Let's find out. Damage projection. As always, our assumption are we are comparing our strikes against a high armor class, and we are progressing with striking runes and potency runes and so on as expected for our character level. Our comparison is with the usual double slicing fighter, and this is what our damage looks like. Until level 5, our routine is just 2 regular strikes, and then from level 5 onwards, we start doing Eldritch Shot plus a cantrip, in particular Gouging Claw. And what we see is that level 6, as I was saying, is the blooming level of the build. At that level, where martials usually decrease the damage per round, we are actually increasing it so much so that we are basically at the same level of the double slicing fighter. But for the rest of our career, while we follow the trend of a traditional fighter, with our standard routine, we are always worse than a dedicated melee specialist, because of all the factors we were considering before. We are a ranged build, we are using dexterity to hit, but we add intelligence to damage, thanks to Gouging Claw. Our weapon damage is worse, and of course, we do not have the +2 proficiency bonus that the fighter has. Therefore, it is not a surprise that our damage is always lower. But what happens if we consider our Nova turn? So a turn where we use a level spell to deal damage. So here I put the highest spell slot I have available, and I used a Shocking Grasp in that slot. So I'm using Eldritch Shot and Shocking Grasp. Again, I can only do it starting from level 6, but we see how impressive the damage increase is. And look at this, we are out-damaging one of the best damage-dealing builds in the game. Every single level, and at level 20 we are just dominating. So we are absolutely amazing. Or are we? Again, this is an unfair comparison. We are using 3 actions. The fighter is only using 2. So if we give an extra action to the fighter with a -10 penalty strike, what the damage looks like is actually this. It rises a bit, and then we are no longer dominating, but we are still competing. At level 6, we are still out-damaging them, and then we are relatively close for the rest of our career. Sometimes we are a bit better, sometimes we are a bit worse. Of course, considering this 3rd strike, we see that our average routine, the one which involves just the cantrip, is a bit worse than we were expecting. But in our Nova mode, when we use limited resources, so not something we can do every day, but we can do it when it matters, and there we are really shining. Of course, the fighter can double slice all day long and never run out of it, so they have that advantage. Another advantage they have is that they have opportunity attacks. They are in melee, they can use their reaction to deal damage. That is not something we can really do. Yes, we have Blood Vendetta, but the damage we do is just paltry when compared to the strike of a dedicated martial class, so I'm not even going to show that comparison. But if we add that additional attack, then we are just completely outmatched. But what we are trading for that damage is something perhaps more valuable than raw damage, and is survivability, and also arguably action economy. The fighter always has to be in melee, so they might have to move. They might have to spend an entire turn just moving, walking through obstacles, climbing on walls or something. Whereas in that scenario where the fighter struggles, that's where we truly shine. And on the other hand, if the enemies want to engage us in melee, they have to waste actions to reach us, and we can keep the distance. And the more we keep the distance, the more effective we are. We are going to get hit less often, we are going to get crits less often, we are going to probably spend less time on the ground agonizing in death. So this is something that cannot really be shown in a graph. And as usual, we are seeing in Pathfinder that damage is not the end-all, be-all of parameters to evaluate the effectiveness of a class. It is important to gain an understanding of how our features are performing, but there is so much more depth and complexity in Pathfinder characters, and I think that this build really shows that. So, having shown the damage projection, let us draw the conclusion for our build. Today we built a sniper build which specializes on high mobility and single strikes at an insane amount of range. When this character is allowed to engage in the desired combat routine, it is an unstoppable demon. It is so powerful that it might feel a bit cheesy. You cannot touch them, and they can deliver absolutely stellar damage at an incredible distance. Thank God monsters don't have character levels, because throwing this kind of build against a party is a recipe for a total party kill. This character is not just a very effective damage dealer, they also have, thanks to their huge skill proficiency, the ability to engage in many different activities and be reasonably competent at them. They are very knowledgeable. The access to spellcasting gives them a lot more than just raw damage. It gives them buffs for survivability, crowd control of all things, and a lot of utility, as I showed with the example of instant armor. The essence of a spellcaster is being able to pull out a particular niche spell to solve a particular situation, and being able to do that as a marshal is absolutely amazing. While it does feel like this character can do pretty much anything and is very effective at their specialized activity, it is also true that it has some obvious weaknesses. Cramped space and narrow corridors are the bane of this character. It can very easily be countered this way, so the DM is not powerless against our bullshit. And also on the social side of things, we are pretty weak, and engaging in social situations is a very fun aspect of role-playing games, so certainly this build is not a build for everyone. Most importantly, we shouldn't forget that at the end of the day, we are a small, tiny fairy which is riding around on a velociraptor. And if that doesn't sound like a recipe for an amazing campaign, I don't know what does. The Ranger as a class supported very well the theme of this sniper character, both by giving us access to the animal companion, which is our mount, and through its hunter's edge, which allows us to leverage this incredibly, insanely high range for our bow strikes. In the end, the character that we made today is just an aspect of what the Ranger can potentially be. So we saw the Ranger as an archer and a single strike archer, but the edges allow you to have different branching paths that can result in radically different characters. And this is, as usual, the mark of a very well-designed class. And with this, we have reached the end of the video. I thank you all very much for listening, and I'll see you all in the next one.